I'm Nathan Gita.
And I'm Aaron Eckman.
From BC's northern capital.
Welcome to the Ram and Stag Show. Good afternoon, I'm Aaron Eckman. Welcome to Ram and Stag. I'm here with my co-host, Nathan Gita. And we wanted to say Happy Pride. Happy Pride Week, I guess. Happy Pride Month.
It's a month now.
It's a whole month now. So Happy Pride Month. I have a lot of really good memories about Pride. I was here in the northern capital in Prince George. I was one of the first marshals of the Pride Parade back, when there was only a handful of people that would walk down the road marching it. This is well over 10 years ago. And you could still hear a few people on the side of the street yelling insults,
slurs,
homophobic
pejoratives.
slurs and remarks at people. It's not like that anymore. Things have got quite a bit better. I don't think they have as much difficulty finding people to volunteer to marshal the parade anymore. But one thing I've noticed that has changed is that it doesn't appear to me to be an adult event anymore. I grew up hanging around places like Vancouver and stuff. I've got a lot of gay friends. I've got gay people in my family. And so, I spent a lot of time at gay bars at a very young age watching drag. When I say young age, I mean not quite young enough to get into a bar, but old enough that you're going to try to get into a bar. So, I don't want to tell too many stories out of school, but I was in watching drag queens at a sub 19 year old age. But to me, those shows, as entertaining and as foundational as they were always adult shows. Part of the desire for me to get into bars to go see a drag queen was that I was sneaking into a bar to go do an adult thing, to talk about, sex and to have, and to watch jokes about sex. And so it's been strange to watch Pride sort of evolve into this thing that is now this regular activity in schools, like elementary schools. So I know many of you probably turned on social media or YouTube or just the TV over the last few days, and you've seen all sorts of videos of children coming to school in the morning, and their teachers are all there dressed in rainbows and unicorn things, and it's like this whole big thing. And so there's been this interesting development that started to play out in Canada. Some people are starting to notice that on these Pride event days at elementary schools, there's been a large number, an abnormal number of students not showing up to school. They've also noticed in areas where there's a high Muslim population that a high percentage of Muslim students are not showing up to school on days when they're celebrating Pride-related festivities. And there was a interesting recording that surfaced that many of you have probably heard of a teacher in Alberta at, I think it's called Londonderry School, tearing strips off of, I don't know if it was one Muslim student or multiple Muslim students, but almost screaming at them because they hadn't shown up to a Pride event at the school. And, I won't go through it. We'll play the clip here. We'll put it in post. It's not that long, but essentially it shows the mindset of this woman who's frankly, she's probably a straight white woman. She's probably not even gay. I mean, I don't know, but she sounds to me like one of these people that just tries way too hard and gets it very wrong, because she got it very wrong. She essentially told these women, and you've probably heard it, or these students, that they weren't good enough to be in Canada unless they bought into the whole, basically eschewed their religious beliefs and bought into the whole Pride thing. Devout Muslims obviously aren't going to do that. And so this is blown up, as you can imagine. And it sparked an interesting debate and conversation, which isn't new, but I think it's at a level now where a lot more people are going to feel emboldened to take part in this conversation, and that is over the question of who gets to control children, or not who gets to control them, but who gets to educate them, particularly about sex. And I would guess, and I'm not a parent, so I'm not an expert on this, but I have a pretty good idea that the vast majority of parents across the political spectrum, doesn't matter if they're social democrats or conservatives, probably believe and probably agree that parents should be the final authority on what what happens to a child and how they're educated. It's pretty clear in Canada today that the federal government nor the NDP, provincially or federally, believe that that's the case. They believe that there is an authority central authority that is to educate our children, and that's it. And so what I think is really worrying parents so much, and what's going to become a bigger issue as time goes on, is that people aren't feeling safe to send their kids to school anymore, not because they think their kids are necessarily going to get hurt, but because an increasing number of people across the political spectrum, again, fundamentally believe that their child, if left at a school, may end up in a gender clinic. And that's a crazy, surreal fear to have. It's like when you talk to people about that fear who maybe they don't have it, they don't even believe that anybody would have that fear. But I can tell you, it's a palpable fear in parents that I talk to. And again, whether they're left or right wing. And so this is going to play out. It's going to be very divisive. I think already you're starting to see politics provincially and federally start to come down on this question. This is increasingly becoming one of those issues that rises to the top, like the economy, like jobs, et cetera. It's going to be a key election issue. Nathan, I want to get your thoughts on this because I'm not a historian. I'm a bit of an amateur historian.
We're all amateur historians. We only get to live in the time we're in.
That's right. But if you take a look at countries that have entered into civil war, they've all done so generally for smaller reasons.
Yes.
We're talking about this fundamental belief that, of around who gets to determine the future of a child, the state or the parents.
And further to that, we're also talking about a fundamental question of the very, very nature of one's humanity. There has always been normative and non-normative sexual acts and sexual realities. That's always been the case. Gender has had all sorts of redefinitions through the years. Even for conservatives, if a conservative thinks that it's the place of the woman in the family, the wife in the family, to stay home with the children while the man works, well, that may be so to your values, but the fact of the matter is that it wasn't that long ago that women had absolutely meaningful group work where they also did have the children as well, but they were in group, they were not isolated, they were not in suburbia, and that reality, basically was finally extinguished, probably somewhere in, Central Asia and parts of Europe after the First World War finally killed enough people that we all became industrialized and two people had to work, particularly after the Second World War. So the fact of the matter is that gender has had different definitions throughout history, even within conservative milieus. But this is different. This is a different question because we're talking about the essentialness of what is male and what is female. I mean, it's trending everywhere. It's Matt Walsh's "What is a Woman?" And I've seen people get red-pilled by this who, they were progressives until 5 seconds ago, and now that's it. They've had enough, and they're not getting on this train anymore. And, we used to have hug me daddy or hug me mommy or a hug me non-binary person and give me psychological pablum. Yell me better is coming. And I think you're right, Aaron. There's a serious question to be had. Will this be outright violent?
Well, where's the town in the States where there was this, there was a bit of violence that took place at a pride parade a couple days ago, or maybe it was yesterday. I can't remember what town it is, but there was basically a rather large group of Armenians, right? Who, they've dealt with some tough shit, right?
Yes.
There's a whole Armenian genocide thing, they've gone through some tough times.
They got down with the sickness, as it were.
They got down with the sickness. And, a lot of them that were there are new Canadians, immigrants. So, the kind of people that progressives generally get behind, support. It's the kind of people I would support. I'm quite happy about immigrants coming to Canada as long as they do so legally. But they don't necessarily have progressive views when it comes to LGBTQ.
They come from the old country, and in the old country, things go the old way.
That's right. So they had a little bit of a protest outside of a school somewhere in the States. I can't remember what town it was in, and it looks like it got a bit violent, and it looks like some of the sort of anarchistic-looking Antifa type people that were on the side of the sort of the Pride Parade crossed over and got through the police that were trying to keep them separate and started throwing some punches. Well, some of those Armenian guys, they can throw some punches back. And they did. No. It's almost as if they've faced worse.
Yes, indeed.
But this is, we have a mutual friend who made a very good observation watching it as well. said, look, like, these activists are going to have to figure this out eventually, that if they keep just punching people randomly and repeatedly, eventually people are going to start punching back. And figuratively, I can say I think that's starting to happen. You're starting to see like people like Billboard Chris, for instance.
Chris Elston.
Chris Elston, who travels the world. I mean, it's quite amazing to me.
With just some sandwich boards.
Just
like,
sandwich boards.
really, like,
yeah,
some words on them.
For the first few years that he was doing it, just the only guy standing out in front. Now he's usually got a crew with him. He's got an amazing number of people that watch the videos that he puts up every day.
I mean, he's entirely crowdsourced. He doesn't have the money to do this by himself.
No, and so he's got an amazing amount of support. And these are the kind of folks that are sort of opening up the ability to have these conversations again. And it reminds me of opposing the Iraq War back when George W. Bush was president, because if you oppose that war, the immediate response from those who supported it was, you don't support the troops, right?
Yes.
And it's the same now trying to argue with these trans rights activists. If you don't support the genital mutilation of underage children without their parents' knowledge, you're a transphobe, right? You don't support all trans people. You hate all trans people. That's
You're a bigot.
That's the message. Yeah.
You're an intolerant bigot.
Doesn't matter how many trans friends you have. It doesn't matter, what your own sexuality is. Nothing matters, because they will say this to trans people.
Yes, because and this was something that was talked about a long time ago. Because even when it whatever, like certain water is under the bridge at this point. The horse has left the barn. There are certain things, certain genies we can't put back in the bottle. And so conservatives made arguments about these slippery slopes a long time ago. I'm not going to revisit all of that. There's actually plenty on the left nowadays that are having to come back to their conservative friends 20, 30 years later and say, you know what, you had a point. But leaving that aside, let's talk for a moment about we're going back from kind of the 1960s and then into the civil rights 80s and then the triumph of pride in the 90s and early aughts. What was that about at a certain level? And what that had to do with it was expression, and to your point earlier in the monologue, adults. This had to do with, you can't control adults. This is a secular liberal democracy, and they can do whatever the hell they want. They're adults by definition, as long as there's consent between the adults.
And no one's harmed.
And that's that. So that was the argument. And of course, again, for those of us on a particular part of the spectrum, even that doesn't square, but that doesn't matter. By the parameters of the secular democratic society that we're in, that was what the addition added up to. That was how the math worked out. Well, that old guard is being, marched out. They're being trampled upon and thrown away because they remain on that side of, yes, we believe in libertinism, but we believe in libertinism for adults. And now, of course, children are being implicated. And they're like, that was not what we signed up for. That was not what we marched for. That was not why we got fire hosed or had our bathhouses raided by the Toronto police as late as the 80s, I think.
And it's increasingly, at least the people I've talked to, it's increasingly gay people that are saying this, right? It's increasingly gay people that are saying,
well, because if you're a young man who's effeminate at all, you're going to end up not being an effeminate young man anymore. You're going to get transitioned.
Well, that's the thing that a lot of gay folks are realizing, is that I know a number of gay people who have confided to me that if they were young today, there's no way they would have been able to avoid ending up in a gender clinic, getting their genitals mutilated, basically. It's just the way they know, right? And they're terrified. And a lot of them see this, and I am firmly of the belief that the BC NDP, in bringing through SOGI and pushing this stuff into schools, are effectively making it so that this cannot be extracted. Like, I don't know how we get out of this now.
And technically speaking, it's not even part of the curriculum per se. It's a layer on top of it. It's not actually embedded in the BC curriculum per se, but every school is basically required to participate in it. And
it's Brunswick or Nova Scotia, I can't remember which now, as a result of the complaints that are coming over SOGI, are re-examining it. So that'll be the one to watch. If they can.
And I mean, even here in Prince George, we're having a school board election, and you better believe that the anti-SOGI crowd has fielded a bunch of candidates.
Have they?
Yes, they're being very clear about, nope, we're not doing this no more.
This is kind of on the fly here, but I'd be interested to know who they are, because I was looking through the profiles yesterday. I noticed even Milton Mahoney.
He's back.
Yeah, but if you read his interview in The Citizen, it appears to me that he's on board with SOGI now.
Oh. So, well, that's not good.
No. So, unless he's
live from Ram and Stag, color commentary on Prince George School Board elections.
So I don't know if there is an anti-Soji candidate running in the Prince George by-election.
Interesting. Well, I will double check on that. Yeah. I will get back to you. I think coming back to this fundamental issue of Soji and everything else, I think if you want to put some humor to it in order to kind of satirize the situation, we all remember the hit show that Dan Harmon helped write called Community. And in the very first season of Community, they are trying to come up with a mascot. So they come up with the Greendale Human Beings because they decided to not be the Eagles or the Bears or whatever. They are the Greendale Human Beings because that's exactly what Dean Pelton sounds like, played by something Rush or whatever. He won an Oscar in the midst of all that because he helped write something that won an Oscar. Anyways, the point is, Jeff Winger shows up, right, playing the skeptical leading role, and he sees what they're up to, and they say, well, this is our human color wheel. It's the rapper seal his skin to his teeth. That we just have that as our human color wheel, and they got all these things they've eliminated and everything else. And they have this like whole conspiracy red, dots board looking thing of just crap of like all these things they're not going to do to make sure that this is as neutral a human being as possible. And Jeff just looks at them and goes, you know what? I think you guys have made not being racist. And here we are, because Soji was sold. It was sold as anti-bullying legislation. If we bring this in, then people are going to be safer. People are going to be able to express themselves.
Well, that's the key word. It's always safety.
Yes, safety.
And Marcus Aurelius, centuries ago was warning us about the propensity of people in power to use safety to take away your
See,
freedom.
you are an amateur historian. That was a good reach back to Stoicism, one of the key players in Stoicism. But again, we have to ask this question: where do we want society to go? And is that a democratic question? Because make no mistake about that either. So far, the implementation of Soji has not been democratic. It was not as if everybody got a ballot in the mail that said, "Do you want Soji? Yes or no?" That didn't happen. And so now with the school board election here, with what's happening in Nova Scotia, with quite possibly in the provincial election next year, there's going to be alternatives on the ballot that say, no, you know what, you get a say in Soji. And if you don't think this is working, we're going to get rid of it. And that's going to be a challenge because people have been told so far that they don't have a right to have it.
David Eby is the kind of person who fundamentally believes that is wrong. The idea that you could give British Columbian parents or just British Columbians a vote on what education should be like regarding sex for their children in public schools, he doesn't believe that's something that British Columbians should have a right to weigh in on. They just fundamentally, it's not allowed in their mindset.
We'll put together a star chamber and somebody can come up with being the champion of that opposite point of view. And then the star chamber can meet and then disqualify the candidate.
Right. Perfect. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
okay. Well, that I think that sums up that for now. Tune in again next time. We're going to be talking about all the controversial things, all the fun things. This is Ram and Stag. Thanks for watching.
Happy Pride.